Before we dive into the story, if you love galactic HFY tales, hit like, drop a comment on what you'd do if the galaxy's deadliest predator answered to you, and subscribe for more universe-shaking stories. Now, let's begin. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council trembled under the weight of silence. Holographic stars floated above a ring table where 30 alien generals sat, their scales, feathers, and metallic hides catching the cold blue light. No one spoke. They had all seen the recording. None wanted to relive it. The projection flickered again. A fleet of war cruisers, the kind that could level moons, formed a defensive line around the mining world of Orius Prime. Then came the sound. A low, resonant rumble, at first distant, then so deep it shook the chamber like a living heartbeat. One by one the cruisers faltered. Shields overloaded. Crews screamed. And from the stormed horizon, it appeared. A shadow larger than any beast should be, tearing through space as if gravity itself bent to its will. It moved with the grace of something that had never once needed to run from anything. The New York core. Eyes like molten gold. Claws that could shear titanium like fabric. The recording showed it shredding through the lead cruiser, carving a path through steel and fire as if it were made for war. Entire battalions broke ranks at its roar. When the footage ended, the silence returned, thicker than before. General Thalrun of the Zarn Alliance stood slowly, towering over most of the council. His obsidian armor reflected the trembling holograms. "This is not a battle report," he said, voice low but sharp as a blade. "It is a funeral dirge." Across the table, the Shuran Fleet Marshal clicked his mandibles nervously. "Our warships had shields rated for star core impacts. That thing walked through them." "It didn't walk," another whispered, "it hunted." All eyes turned toward the council core where a single intelligence node, a crystalline AI, pulsed in silent calculation. The machine's synthesized voice cut through the tension. Designation: New York core. Biological apex predator. Probability of fleet victory in direct engagement: 0.004%. Several generals shifted uncomfortably. A fleet that could crush armies was nothing to this creature. It was not just dangerous, it was absolute. Thalrun clenched his claws. This creature is not an animal. It is a strategic threat. And if it cannot be killed, it can be controlled. The voice came from the far end of the chamber. An elder with hollow eyes, Admiral Kress of the Outer Rims, leaned forward. He extended a trembling finger toward the final seconds of the recording. "Play the last frame." The hologram flickered. The New York core reared up, its roar ripping through frequencies no translator could soften. A battlecruiser detonated in its wake. Then, a sound. A human voice. One word amplified and raw. And the monster stopped. The room drew a collective breath as the New York core, this unstoppable force of nature, slowly lowered its head to the ground. No chain. No weapon. Just the voice. The AI translated. Audio match: human origin. Identity trace: Elias Corrin. Status: presumed deceased. Last sighted: Hadion Sector, 3 cycles ago. A ripple of shock moved through the chamber. Humans were a young species, barely relevant in galactic politics. They were curious, resilient, irritatingly unpredictable, but certainly not dominant. Yet here, the galaxy's most feared predator knelt before a human's voice as if the universe itself acknowledged the bond. Thalrun leaned forward, his war-scarred face hardening. "You're telling me this beast, this executioner of fleets, follows a man?" "Not follows," Admiral Kress murmured. "It answers." The AI pulsed again, projecting a simplified schematic of the New York core. No known containment protocols have succeeded. Neural override failed. The only behavioral modifier on record is auditory stimulus, originating from Elias Corrin. Probability of control by other individuals: 0%. The Shuran Marshal clicked his mandibles again, a nervous tick. "Then this human, he is the key to everything. If we control him, we control the predator." The chamber filled with whispers. Some called for his capture. Others called for his elimination, fearing the danger of a single man holding the leash of a monster. Thalrun slammed his hand on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Then we find him. No matter where he's buried himself, no matter what jungle he's hiding in, we bring him in. Alive." His gaze hardened into something colder than steel. The New York core may not fear fleets, but it fears him. That makes him the most dangerous man in the galaxy. In the shadows behind the council's circle, a young Zarn lieutenant swallowed hard. "General, if the beast answers only to him, what happens when he says no?" Thalrun didn't answer. He simply stared at the last frame of the recording, the impossible image of a monster bowing, and felt the chill run down his spine. This wasn't just another war. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. And somewhere, far from the council's sterile chamber, in a storm-racked jungle no fleet dared approach, a man who was supposed to be dead was about to learn the galaxy had not forgotten his name. The hunt for Elias Corrin had begun. Rain drummed steadily against the broken canopy of Hadon III, a rhythm as old as the jungle itself. Storms here didn't come and go, they devoured. Trees leaned beneath the weight of roaring winds, and the ground churned with thick, black mud. It was a place most called uninhabitable. For Elias Corrin it was home. He moved through the underbrush like someone who had long since learned to listen rather than force his way forward. A hood shadowed his scar-lined face, rain dripping off its edges in quiet streams. His rifle hung across his back, not in fear of predators but out of habit, a habit from a life he'd tried to bury. The jungle spoke in whispers, the rustle of scaled bodies, the crackle of distant lightning, the faint, guttural growl that made the night itself hold its breath. He paused by the edge of a dark clearing, kneeling to check a tripwire he'd set the night before. It was untouched. Good. They were still keeping their distance. Not out of respect. Out of fear. A low vibration rippled through the ground beneath him, faint at first, then growing like the drumbeat of some unseen giant. Birds scattered. The trees shuddered. Elias closed his eyes. He didn't flinch. He didn't run. He simply whispered into the rain, "You're late." From between the trees emerged a shadow too large to be natural. 6 limbs, each ending in hooked claws that sank into the mud like blades. Its hide gleamed black, slick as oil, and its golden eyes cut through the downpour with unsettling intelligence. The New York Core. To the galaxy, a nightmare. To Elias, something far stranger. The creature lowered its head as it approached him, a rumbling sound vibrating from its chest. It wasn't a growl. It was closer to a purr, if the purr came from a starship engine. Elias reached out and placed his hand against the creature's muzzle. Rainwater beaded on its hide like liquid mercury. "Ashen," he said quietly. The name rolled from his tongue like something old, practiced, unshakable. Ashen exhaled a hot gust of air against his chest, steam cutting through the cold. The predator could have ended him in a blink, could have torn through every defense on this planet, but it bent its massive head lower. It waited. Not for orders. For words. Elias checked the horizon, scanning the tree line through the sheets of rain. Something had changed tonight. Ashen had felt it too. He grabbed the compact binoculars from his belt and peered into the distant ridge. 3 glimmers of unnatural light blinked in the dark, steady, tactical, artificial. Someone had found him. It wasn't the first time. But unlike the scavenger crews before, these lights moved with discipline. Patterned formations. Military. Elias breathed out slowly. He had been a soldier once. He recognized trained hunters when he saw them. Ashen shifted, nostrils flaring. A low growl, this time sharper, echoed from its throat. Elias pressed a hand against its jaw. "No," he whispered. "Not yet." The predator froze, then lowered its massive body until it blended into the undergrowth, an apex shadow obeying a single human voice. The storm swallowed the sound of approaching boots. 6 figures emerged through the rain, wearing black, reflective armor that absorbed light. Their weapons were compact but unmistakably military issue, Zarn Special Ops. Elias stayed crouched, letting the jungle cloak him, watching. Their leader raised a scanner that pulsed against the rain. A brief flash of blue light swept the clearing. "Target confirmed," a voice said over comms. "Human. Alive." Elias didn't move. He counted their breathing, their spacing, their angles. He'd spent years avoiding their wars. He didn't want another one. The squad fanned out in a crescent formation. They thought they were hunting. They didn't understand they'd already entered someone else's territory. Ashen's. The lead soldier stepped on a tripwire Elias had placed near the tree line. It didn't trigger an explosion. Elias didn't need one. The wire sang a faint, sharp note through the dark. Ashen's golden eyes snapped open like suns igniting. A roar tore through the storm. Not just loud. Primordial. The sound reached into bone and memory, the kind of sound designed to make every living thing remember it was prey. The soldiers froze. One stumbled back, his weapon shaking in his hands. Another's knees hit the mud involuntarily. The leader shouted something into the comm, but the words drowned beneath Ashen's bellow. Branches shattered as the predator surged forward, black as a living shadow, water cascading off its armored hide. It didn't strike. It didn't have to. Its presence alone was a weapon sharper than any blade. And then came the sound that stopped the storm itself. Down. Elias's voice was not raised. It didn't need to be. Ashen halted mid-lunge, claws sinking deep into the soil. The growl softened, almost reluctant, but the beast lowered itself until its massive head touched the ground, right at Elias's feet. 6 trained soldiers stood frozen as the most feared predator in the galaxy bowed to a man in a soaked hood and worn boots. The squad leader lifted his visor, rain streaking down a face of pale blue skin and dark eyes that burned with something between awe and terror. "You're Elias Corrin," he said. Elias didn't answer. His hand rested against Ashen's snout, fingers steady. "The Council wants you alive," the leader continued, forcing authority into his voice. "You're coming with us. One way or another." Elias tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "I left their wars a long time ago." "Then you'll fight them again?" the soldier shot back. "Or that thing dies." Ashen's claws flexed, slicing furrows into the mud, but the predator didn't move. It waited as it always did for Elias. He could have fought. He could have vanished deeper into the storm, vanished like a ghost the Council would never catch. But Elias knew what it meant for them to send a strike team to Hadyon 3. If they'd found him, something far worse was coming. He slowly raised both hands, palms outward. "Fine," he said. "Take me in." Ashen growled softly, a sound like distant thunder. Elias looked down at the golden eyes staring back at him. "Stay close," he whispered. The soldiers encircled him cautiously, never once taking their weapons off the beast. The storm swallowed their footsteps as they disappeared into the jungle together. Man, monster, and the soldiers who didn't yet understand that they were not the hunters in this story. Above the canopy, thunder rolled again. The galaxy had found its lost human. What it hadn't realized yet was that it had also unleashed the predator that would answer only to him. The shuttle broke through the black clouds of Hadyon 3 and into the void of orbit, engines rumbling like a caged storm. Elias sat in silence, hands bound with magnetic restraints that pulsed faintly against his wrists. Across from him, the 6 Zarn soldiers kept their rifles trained, not on him but on the massive creature curled against the rear of the bay. Ashen was barely contained inside the reinforced compartment. Chains thicker than a starship's tow cables had been anchored into the walls, but the soldiers knew they were nothing more than decoration. If Ashen decided to move, nothing would stop it. Elias's hood had been pulled back, revealing a face carved by weather and war. His hair was streaked with gray at the temples, his eyes steady and unreadable. One of the soldiers kept sneaking nervous glances at Ashen. Every time the predator exhaled, the shuttle's metal frame creaked under its weight. The squad leader leaned forward. "You seem awfully calm for someone being dragged to the Council," he said. His voice carried the kind of false confidence soldiers wore like armor. Elias didn't look at him. "I've been there before." "That was when you were useful," the soldier replied. "You're useful again now. That's the only reason you're still breathing." Ashen's golden eyes opened slowly. The leader immediately stopped talking. For a moment, the only sound was the predator's steady breathing, a low vibration that filled the cabin. Elias let the silence stretch. It was a language of its own. One the soldiers didn't speak. Hours later, the shuttle slid into the docking corridor of Orkesh Prime, the political core of the Galactic Council. The world was a construct of floating platforms orbiting a dying star, a fortress of polished steel and cold light. Elias stepped out first, cuffs still glowing, flanked by armed soldiers. Ashen followed, restrained by a dozen magnetic locks that hissed as they shifted with each step. Crowds had gathered behind blast shields, diplomats, soldiers, civilians, everyone wanted to see the beast. When Ashen's claws hit the platform, a wave of silence swept the crowd. No weapon was raised. No one dared make a sound. Even from a distance, its presence suffocated. It wasn't just a predator, it was the living embodiment of fear itself. And yet, it walked behind a single human. Elias was led into the council chamber, a vast circular hall beneath a dome of transparent alloy. Stars glimmered above them like cold witnesses. 30 generals sat in their elevated stations, the same faces that had once celebrated him as a soldier, and abandoned him afterward. In the center stood Thalrin, his black armor reflecting the chamber's pale light. The soldiers forced Elias to his knees, but Ashen's growl vibrated through the floor. The guards froze. Thalrin raised a hand, signaling them to stop. "Release him," the general ordered. The lead soldier hesitated. "Sir." "Do it." The restraints on Elias's wrists clicked and fell away. He rubbed his skin absently, his gaze never leaving the alien general. Thowron stared back with the unblinking patience of a man who'd led too many wars. "You've kept yourself hidden well, Elias Corrin," Thowron said. "Did you really think the galaxy would forget the man who commands a god of death?" "I don't command it," Elias replied evenly. "Ashen listens. That's different." The council chamber buzzed with hushed debate. To them the distinction was irrelevant. Control was control. Power was power. Thowron stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Whether it's command or loyalty, the result is the same. The New York Corps bends to your voice. No fleet can stop it. And right now we need it more than ever." Elias tilted his head slightly. "Need it?" The lights dimmed as a massive hollow display rose in the center of the chamber. A map of the outer rings flared into view, systems marked in green, then red, then black. Planet after planet burned out of existence in time-lapse. The Eclipse Swarm. A tide of living ships that consumed everything they touched. "They've taken Zereth," Thowron said quietly. "And 3 fleets with it. Their queen's hive mind fractures communications. No strategy works. No weapon holds. But your beast?" His eyes flicked toward Ashen. "It doesn't follow the logic of war. It terrifies them." Elias studied the projection. He had seen the swarm once before years ago. The council had barely survived that encounter. If they had returned now, then this wasn't a small incursion. It was a reckoning. "You want to use Ashen as a weapon," he said flatly. "We want to survive," Thowron corrected. "And you're going to help us." Elias exhaled slowly, as if weighing an answer he'd already given 100 times in his mind. "And if I say no?" Whispers filled the room again. Someone muttered about neural overrides, someone else about sedatives and control implants. But the moment one of those words left their mouths, Ashen lifted its head. The chamber fell silent. A single sound from the predator was enough to remind everyone of the balance they were playing with. Thowron's voice was softer now. "The swarm won't stop at the border worlds. They will burn everything. Your jungle won't save you. Nothing will. But with the New York Corps at the vanguard, we stand a chance." Elias stared at him. He saw the strategy, the desperation hidden beneath command. They didn't want to control Ashen, they wanted to survive. But the council was the same machine that had abandoned him once, that saw people as levers and beasts as weapons. He turned slightly. Ashen's golden eyes met his, a silent exchange older than any treaty. Ashen didn't understand politics. It understood threat, loyalty, and the weight of his voice. "Elias Corrin," a counselor hissed from above. "This isn't a request." He raised his head, meeting the gaze of every general in the chamber. "Then it's a mistake." The word struck like a blade. A ripple of unease spread through the counselors. But Thowron didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward and lowered his voice. "You don't have to do it for them. Do it to keep Ashen from fighting alone." Elias's jaw tightened. For a brief, unguarded moment, his eyes softened, not for the council but for the creature standing behind him. Outside the chamber walls, distant sirens began to wail. A fresh transmission cut through the speakers, raw with static and fear. Zereth defense grid collapsed. The swarm is moving inward. Estimated arrival to Orkesh perimeter, 7 standard days. The counselors began shouting orders and strategies, the polished mask of their authority cracking under the sound of oncoming war. Thowron didn't move his eyes from Elias. "Decide quickly, human. The galaxy is running out of time." Ashen growled, low and steady, the sound resonating through the bones of every creature in the room. Elias stood slowly, his voice quiet but clear. "I don't fight for your council. I fight for what's mine." Thowron didn't smile, but something like understanding flickered in his gaze. The chamber lights dimmed further as the swarm's advance painted the stars with black. The decision had been made, whether the council realized it or not. Elias and the Predator were moving toward war. The fleet slid out of hyperspace like a spear through a storm. Dozens of ships, Zarn dreadnoughts, Shuran cruisers, human corvettes, hung against the starless dark of Zeretha's orbit. What remained of the system flickered below, a scarred planet wrapped in the sickly glow of the swarm. It moved like a living ocean, an unbroken tide of black, writhing ships that glimmered faintly with bioluminescent veins. Elias stood on the deployment platform, suited in matte black exo-armor. The helmet rested in his hand, his eyes fixed on the maelstrom beyond the hangar's shield. He'd seen war before but never like this. There was no rhythm, no strategy, no room for honor. The swarm didn't fight. It consumed. Behind him, Ashen shifted its massive body, claws scraping against reinforced plating. The hangar lights cast its silhouette across the bay, taller than a gunship, broad as a tank, with eyes burning gold like molten suns. Even among soldiers, hardened veterans who had fought across a dozen systems, no one could look at the creature for long. Some whispered prayers. Others kept their hands near their weapons, though they knew those weapons would do nothing if Ashen turned on them. Thalrin approached, his armor sealed and polished to a dull obsidian sheen. The general moved with the controlled calm of someone who had learned to live beside fear. "You're certain it will listen?" he asked. Elias placed the helmet over his head, the visor sliding down with a hiss. "It doesn't listen," he said. "It chooses." A klaxon wailed through the hangar. The fleet's formation tightened as the swarm began to surge upward, its endless mass curling toward the orbital line like a predator scenting blood. Command chatter flooded the comm channels, shouted orders, coordinates, last-minute prayers. Ashen stepped forward, every motion fluid and unnervingly quiet for something so massive. The flight deck trembled as the blast doors opened, exposing the hangar to the void. The Predator's breathing slowed, chest rising and falling in rhythm with Elias's own. Deployment window opening, a pilot barked through comms. "Once you drop, there's no coming back until it's over." Elias climbed the harness built into Ashen's armored plating and locked in. He'd refused to let them strap bombs or cannons onto the creature. Ashen wasn't a weapon to be mounted. It was something far worse. With a single word, Elias gave the order. "Go." Ashen launched from the hangar like a thunderbolt. A sonic boom rippled through the void as its body cut through the black between stars. No thrusters. No engines. Just speed, raw and terrifying. Below them, the swarm shifted, sensing the intruder. Hundreds of blackened vessels changed direction in perfect, unnatural synchrony, turning upward as one living mind. The first impact came seconds later. Ashen struck the outer edge of the swarm formation like a meteor, ripping into a creature ship the size of a cruiser. Its claws tore through bone and alloy in one motion, the ship splitting apart in a shower of burning ichor. Elias barked coordinates into the fleet comms, marking gaps Ashen ripped open. The Allied ships poured fire through them like water through broken stone. For a moment, the impossible happened. The swarm fell back. Elias moved with the creature as if they shared a single heartbeat. His voice cut through the comm channels, calm and surgical, directing ships to flank, reposition, strike. Ashen leapt from one vessel to the next, shredding through the hive's outer rings, its roar reverberating through vacuum on every frequency the enemy could hear. That roar had broken fleets before. Now it became the rallying cry of a desperate alliance. Thalrin's fleet surged into the gap Ashen carved. Zarn dreadnoughts roared forward, cannons blazing. For the first time, soldiers didn't just follow orders, they followed the Predator. But the swarm was not mindless. From the depths of the black tide, a shape emerged, larger than anything the fleet had faced. A Leviathan. Its mass eclipsed the stars behind it, wings unfolding like a shadow swallowing the sky. Its scream rattled the hulls of entire ships. Elias felt Ashen tense beneath him. The New York Corps had never faced something this large. The Leviathan lunged. Ashen met it head-on, slamming into its bone-carved chest with the force of a comet. They spun together into the storm, teeth against armor, claws against hide. The impact sent shockwaves that rocked Allied ships out of position. Elias clung to the harness, his HUD flashing warnings in blood-red light. "Hold the line." Thalrin's voice cracked across comms. "If that thing breaks through, the fleet's done." Ashen roared again, a sound like a star tearing itself apart. The Leviathan shrieked in reply, its tendrils lashing around Ashen's limbs. For a heartbeat, the two monsters were locked in a silent, savage war, the galaxy watching through trembling scanners. Elias forced his breathing steady. He knew this creature. He knew its pulse, its will. "Ashen," he whispered through his comm, "with me?" Ashen responded like a storm answering thunder. It twisted, tore through the Leviathan's tendrils, and plunged its claws deep into the creature's chest. A wave of black ichor exploded outward, freezing into drifting shards. The Leviathan convulsed, its scream cutting through the swarm's psychic network. For the first time their coordination faltered. The fleet struck as one. Cannons and plasma lances tore into the disoriented swarm, burning holes through its living armor. But victory demanded its price. A massive tendril, severed but still alive, slammed into Ashen's flank, sending both Predator and Rider tumbling through open space. Elias's helmet display fractured with static as the harness tore. The two figures spun into darkness, separated from the fleet's formation. Ashen stabilized itself with a guttural, wounded snarl, golden eyes blazing. A streak of dark blood trailed behind its body. Elias's chest ached from the impact, but his voice came steady. "Stay with me." The Leviathan was dying but not dead. It turned its colossal head toward them, a final, frenzied lunge building in the void. Ashen moved before the ships could react. It launched forward again, faster than before, driven not by command but by its own rage. The two titans collided once more. Claws met bone. Teeth met steel. A blinding flash split the darkness. When the light cleared, the Leviathan was falling apart, its massive body crumbling like burnt paper. Ashen drifted in its wake, its chest heaving, wounds etched deep into its flesh. The swarm began to scatter, their hive mind cracked, their queen retreating beyond the rim. The fleet erupted into controlled chaos, shouts of relief, victory, disbelief. Thalron's voice cut through it all. "We hold Zereth." Elias's visor was cracked, blood streaking the edge of his vision. He reached out, resting a hand on the creature's neck, the motion slow and deliberate. "Good," he whispered. Ashen didn't answer with sound. It didn't have to. It had fought for him, not for their war. Below them, the broken remains of the Leviathan burned like a dying star. Around them, the fleet turned its guns outward again. This was not the end of the swarm. It was the beginning. And both man and monster knew it. The battle above Virilia burned like a second sun, streaks of plasma and broken hulls scattering through the void like fiery comets. The Galactic Coalition's flagship trembled under the weight of impact, alarms crying out in a chorus of desperation. Generals barked orders, engineers scrambled to reroute power, but none of them could ignore the single shape descending through the inferno. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't an escape pod. It was alive. The Predator. Vale stood in the observation bay, jaw locked, every muscle in his body bracing for what he'd trained his entire life to face. It was here. Not a rumor. Not a transmission. Not a warning. The apex of all known life, Nyx, the devourer of empires, had chosen this battlefield. And yet, beneath the terror, beneath the raw instinct screaming at him to run, he wasn't looking at the Predator. He was looking at the man standing in front of it. Elias. The human's boots thudded softly against the metal floor as the bay doors opened. The moment he stepped through, the Predator followed like a shadow given form. Its limbs were silent, its obsidian carapace glistening with the faint glow of starlight. Every species in the room froze. Marines lowered their weapons without realizing it. Officers forgot to breathe. The air grew heavier as if the presence of the beast itself warped reality. Vale felt the weight of his pulse in his throat. "You brought it here," he whispered. Elias didn't flinch. His eyes held no fear, no pride, just the cool, centered clarity of someone who'd already made peace with everything that could kill him. "No," Elias replied calmly. "It chose to come." Outside the viewport, Coalition cruisers shattered like fragile glass under the onslaught of the swarm, a plague-like armada descending upon the sector. The Predator's gaze shifted, not at the ships, but at the swarm. Its four black eyes narrowed and a low, resonant growl rolled through the bay. It wasn't the sound of a creature preparing to fight. It was the sound of something older than war, older than stars, declaring dominion. The swarm, a force that had conquered hundreds of worlds, slowed. "Are you seeing this?" Vale's second-in-command hissed over comms, voice trembling. Vale didn't answer. He was. So was every sensor array and every terrified soldier across the fleet. The swarm wasn't retreating, but it hesitated. For the first time in recorded history they hesitated. Elias took a slow step forward, and the Predator moved with him like an extension of his will. "This isn't about us anymore," Elias said quietly. "This is between hunters." The bay lights flickered. Outside, the swarm's central dreadnought pulsed with bioluminescent hatred, its massive mandibles unfurling. The Predator let out a roar that tore through the sound barriers of the ship, a roar that was not just heard but felt. The sound rippled through every hull, through every consciousness in orbit. It was a language of dominance every species understood at a cellular level. And then the Predator leapt. It shot into the void without propulsion, its form bending physics itself. Vale watched it pierce the dreadnought's organic plating like a blade through water. Bioweapons fired, entire decks detonated, but the Predator carved through the swarm as though it were cutting through paper. The sensors displayed impossible readings, one life form outpacing entire fleets. Elias stayed in the bay, unmoving, but his heartbeat was steady and synced. Vale saw it on the readings. The Predator moved with a rhythm that matched Elias's pulse. Every kill, every strike, every scream of the dying swarm was in time with the beat of a human heart. "You're connected to it," Vale breathed. Elias tilted his head slightly. No. It listens. That's different. The dreadnought cracked like a dying star. The swarm broke formation, their once perfect coordination fracturing into chaos. Whole fleets began turning, scattering, retreating, not from the coalition, but from one being. The Predator returned in silence, its form stained with luminescent ichor, smoke curling off its limbs. The beast landed softly on the observation deck, massive and still. For a heartbeat, it looked at Elias and the entire galaxy held its breath. Elias raised a hand, not in command but acknowledgement. The Predator lowered its head. On the comms, coalition officers stammered over reports. Entire enemy fleets had broken off. The war wasn't won, but it had shifted. And everyone knew it wasn't because of technology or strategy. It was because something the universe feared above all had chosen to listen to a human. Vale took a step forward, his voice low but steady. Why you? Elias's jaw tightened, not in arrogance but in quiet pain. Because when I found it, I didn't run. I didn't fight it. I stood. The Predator's black eyes flicked toward Vale, and in that gaze he understood. This creature did not serve humans. It didn't serve anyone. But it respected strength. And somewhere in a forgotten forest years ago, one man had faced death without flinching. And death had bowed. The sirens cut through the silence. Swarm reinforcements were warping in, twice the size, thrice the rage. The fleet's comms erupted into frantic noise. But Vale wasn't afraid anymore. Not after what he'd seen. Can it do it again? Vale asked. Elias's lips curved into something almost feral. It never stopped. The Predator lifted its head. Space rippled around it like the surface of a black ocean. And then, with one thunderous, primal roar that made entire enemy armadas pause in terror, the universe learned the hard way, there are things more terrifying than warships. More final than extinction. And the deadliest of them all answered to a human's voice. The bay shook as Elias and the Predator vanished into the dark. The fleet followed behind, no longer in retreat but in the wake of something unstoppable. Across the stars, 1,000 civilizations would remember this day, not as a victory of armies, but as the moment death itself took sides. And it did not choose them. It chose him.